This was supposed to be a simple match vlog about my team, Manchester United, and the second time I watched them live ever, against their arch rivals Liverpool no less. But it turned into the worst trip of my life. So yeah, change of plans. This story involves drunks, people trying to break into trams, mystery liquids dripping from the ceiling, rude airport staff, and a whole lot more, unfortunately. Buckle up. After 2 terrible hours of sleep, I wake up at 4 AM and drive to the airport. On the flight, I'm pumped for the day ahead, and so is the guy next to me, apparently, because he immediately orders a glass of wine. If it wasn't early in the morning, I would have probably joined him. Then he orders another one, and another, and then something bumps my chair. It's some kid who can't stop fiddling with her tray table. However, she does it just subtly and infrequently enough that I can't justify telling her off. Truly a masterclass in getting on my nerves. The now inebriated gentleman enjoys his 5th glass of wine, assuming I didn't miss any, and has finally worked up the courage to talk to me as we're about to land.
Wow, look at all those wind turbines. I've never seen so many before. It never ends.
At 9:20 AM local time, we touch down in London, even though the match is in Manchester. You see, flying straight to Manchester was more than twice as expensive as flying to London and taking the train to Manchester. Really unfortunate coincidence that the flight tickets to Manchester happened to be so expensive right then. Extremely unlucky timing. The taxi ride from Heathrow was also too expensive, and the driver wasn't too fond of United. But my dad and I didn't have time to dwell on that, since we had to quickly drop our bags at the hotel and head straight back to the train station where we'd been dropped off by the taxi. The Wi-Fi on the train to Manchester was useless, so I was just completely alone with my thoughts for over 2 hours. Dad said he'd almost told a woman to put her leg down from the side of his train seat, but it turned out she was on crutches, so good thing he stayed silent. We finally arrive in Manchester and wander around like headless chickens trying to find the tram. Once we do, the tram is absolutely packed, but it takes us right to Old Trafford. Well, the cricket ground at least. My dad was convinced it was the real thing for a minute. As we approach the actual stadium, it starts pouring rain, making us even more desperate to get to our lounge. And maybe a beer. Now, when I hear the word lounge, I picture cigars, attentive waiters, expensive champagne, people in flashy suits. That wasn't quite the case here. But even though we had to wait like 10 minutes only to get a dirty table, it was the trip's big highlight along with the few opening minutes of the game, when the atmosphere was great. Then things went downhill. I luckily missed Liverpool's first goal since the beer I drank had to come out, but I unfortunately witnessed their 2 other goals. I said the tram was packed on the way here, but the journey back redefined what that word means. There were also people who redefined what it means to be an idiot by trying to break in even though the doors are closed and the tram is clearly full, causing delays at every single stop. After around 19 trillion years, the tram finally reaches our destination, and we walk the remaining distance to Piccadilly. We settle down at a cafe and have a cup of coffee to stay alive. Also, they had baked too many croissants, so we were given a couple for free, which was a pleasant surprise. But don't worry, my suffering is not over. Stay tuned. We board the train back to London and find a dad and his daughter sitting in our seats. No big deal, they move without a fuss, but the seats they leave behind, wet. And there's something dripping from the ceiling. I tell myself it's just water. At this point, I'm too drained to care. Let's just get back to the hotel and sleep. Just as we find a moment of peace, a couple of...
So how much money you spent? I reckon like £1 only to watch United.
A couple of drunk, talkative 60-year-olds enter the train and take a seat with us. I know their age because they told me. This dynamic duo finally got off at Stockport and offered us to come with them for some beers. To be fair, if I was traveling alone and didn't have a plane to catch the next day, I would have probably joined them. They weren't mean. But you also have to remember that this has been a very long, unsuccessful day, and I was sober as a nun. A couple of slow hours go by before we finally get to the hotel, and surprise, Wi-Fi doesn't work. And the shower was claustrophobic, with the light so blinding it felt like I was being interrogated while trying to wash my face. By the next morning, I was practically bouncing out of bed, euphoric at the thought of finally heading home. But of course there was yet another twist. The subway was partially shut down for construction, so we had to take another overpriced taxi back to Heathrow. Going through airport security ruined my trip even more, which I didn't think was possible at that point. For reference, I packed so little that everything fit into a laptop case, though I didn't even bring the laptop. As I'm about to take out my electronics and such, a security officer starts talking to me.
You've got a laptop in there.
No, I'm just using it as a bag. Inside there's a sealed bag with toothpaste, deodorant and...
It needs to come out.
I know, that's what I was doing, before you interrupted me with the most unnecessary conversation in human history. Needs to come out. Your manners need to come out, cause I'm not seeing any of them right now. There's nothing to say about the rest of the journey home. I was just ecstatic that this ordeal was finally over. If you want to see me on a trip I actually liked, check out my experiences at the 2023 Nations League finals. If you enjoy my suffering, rewatch this video, I guess.